the state of the network news.
We'll profile Michael and Janet's older sister, Rebe Jackson.
We'll talk with Oscar nominee Dennis Hopper.
And Andrew Lloyd Webber helps the homeless. Homeless cats, that is.
If you put me in a house, I would much prefer a flat.
At the top of the showbiz headlines, the television coverage of the release of the Tower Commission report on the Iran-Contra arms for hostages situation. Although there was a lack of the usual TV staples of exciting pictures, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS all provided extensive and in-depth reports from the time the report was issued in the morning until late at night. Seemingly everywhere, and sometimes it appeared at the same time, were the members of the commission. These somewhat elderly gentlemen displayed enormous patience and great stamina, as well as fleetness of foot, jumping from one network to the next over the course of the day and far into the night. But the networks were right to keep after Senator Tower, Secretary Muskie, and General Scowcroft, since they were the source of the report. Television proved, at least to this viewer, that it can cover a story that has little visual impact as well as the print media can. That's the good news. On the downside of the coin, the bad news is that veteran ABC News executive Av Weston has been sidelined as executive producer of 2020 and Our World. As Frank Radis reports, this story is an amalgam of corporate infighting and high-pressure politics.
It began with a company-sanctioned self-critical analysis of the way news is covered at ABC.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Executive producers throughout that network, in part reacting to an industry-wide cost-cutting effort, penned memos with their own ideas about slashing budgets and methods of operation. One of those documents became public, thus angering ABC chief Roone Arledge. Vice President and executive producer Av Weston's tome to cost-effectiveness, Days of Penury, Days of Affluence, talked of the fat in the Web's news division through a series of comparisons about the way it was and the way it is at ABC. CNN's Don Farmer was a correspondent at ABC during those developing years.
ABC has grown so big in terms of budget and personnel, and what has happened is they now throw money, that is to say people who cost a lot of money, at every possible story. They cover everything, and most of it never gets on the air in that one 22-minute news hole they have every evening.
In fact, Weston's memo was particularly hard on the way the entertainment networks cover news in general, saying top management at both ABC and CBS have publicly expressed concern that the nearly $300 million expenditure by the combined three broadcast organizations for news coverage is excessive, particularly in the face of competent competition by local news operations and CNN, and the unmistakable similarity between the output of all three networks on their dinner-hour evening newscasts. It's clear that ABC, NBC, and CBS are all re-examining their financial status, but as one ABC executive said today, those re-examinations need to be done in-house and not publicly. In the case of Av Weston, one must question his motives by going public with his thoughts. Was he pressing for more power within ABC, or is he genuinely concerned about the future of news coverage? No one from Mr. Weston's office would return our calls, so the answer remains unspoken. Frank Radis, CNN, New York.
As a PS to that story, when asked if we planned any cuts, CNN Vice President Bob Fernand said our plans for the future call for continued expansion, including preparations for opening 2 additional foreign bureaus, including one in China. Also, we'll continue to add staff as our requirements dictate, end quote. Liz?
Budget cuts at the 3 entertainment network divisions are leading to upheavals in those organizations, affecting rank-and-file workers at many levels. Fritz Mayer has this story.
CBS News writers have authorized their union to call a strike if a new contract cannot be agreed upon by midnight Sunday. A walkout by the Writers Guild East would affect ABC's World News Tonight as well. The main issue is layoffs.
We refuse to capitulate on some areas that mean job security for our folks and that mean anything approaching a 2-tiered wage system, and then anything that means a lessening of quality in the places that we work in.
ABC and CBS refuse to comment on negotiations, but industry sources say the networks want the right to lay off workers on the basis of performance rather than seniority. On another front, the union that represents camera crews and technicians at NBC is about to begin its negotiations for their new contract. A NABET spokesman has called NBC's initial proposals devastatingly destructive to the union. Newsweek's media editor says these problems are just the tip of the iceberg.
I think the turmoil is really just beginning. These are just the earliest signs of the real earthquake that is about to hit this whole industry.
Executives at CBS, ABC, and NBC are facing the problems with silence. None would agree to appear on camera for this report. Fritz Mayer, CNN, New York.
Joining us now live in our Washington, D.C. studios is Eleanor Randolph, media reporter for the Washington Post. Eleanor, with everybody cutting back and approximately 3 out of 4 Americans saying their prime source for news is television, is that going to affect the amount of information and the quality of it that we receive?
I don't think it'll affect the amount of information, but it might affect the quality of it. I think the network news operations certainly were fat. They were the men in limousines. I remember in 1984, the networks would go in and they would rent an entire hotel floor wherever there was a primary or a caucus. But they don't need that, obviously, but when they start cutting back, the question is whether they will cut back, say, in foreign bureaus, whether the network news operations will start scaling back their actual news operations and start going more for analysis. And I think that will be a loss for the viewer.
Now, can those old dogs learn new tricks? That's the question, the guys that run the network news bureaus.
Well, it's interesting. I think you've got 3 new owners of the 3 big networks. And what they are really saying is that they have run some of their operations on a lower budget. And I think there is a middle ground there. ABC especially is the one I think you're going to see, where you're going to see a lot of turmoil. Because their network news operation is now a solid third, and Roone Arledge is known for taking a chance, and I think he'll do that, especially now.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleanor, for coming and being with us today.
Thank you.
Liz?
One final note on the network. CBS Chairman William Paley remains in stable condition. The 85-year-old Paley was admitted to New York's hospital's Cornell Medical Center Sunday for treatment of pneumonia. No word yet on when he might be released.
Coming up next on Showbiz Today, we'll go behind the wheel with former racer Jackie Stewart.
Next week, we'll talk with Liz Taylor and Judith Krantz. Showbiz Today brings you the latest entertainment news.
I'm Bobby Valentine, manager of the Texas Rangers, owner of this restaurant, and fan of Sports Illustrated.
And I'm Terry Forster, well-known baseball pitcher, food connoisseur, and sports fan.
Well, I like to tell you